Hey everybody, it's RPG Gilmore here, bringing you a build video for the Paladin tank, and I'll start off with the gear. For right now, I am using Batir Shaman Mask, uh, and I use power for all the reinforces. The Martyr's Placard, the Primal Restoration of Bendis, that's a random guess on that one. The Mirage set, and the Boots of the Alpha, Sigil of the Devoted, Sigil of the Oathbound Paladin, Eye of the Giant, and Shard of Orcus Wand for the set bonus. And then the Demon Lord's neck and waist. And then Ring of the Cursebringer, which is replaceable with a number of other options. And the Ring of the Hunter +5. And then just the Greater Everfrost set. And with this gear, I've been able to tank Temple of the Nine Gods without any issue. For stats, I am sitting at a resting 185,000 HP, 30,489 power, 10k crit, and 7k armor pen. When the companion procs, it's fairly substantial. For defense, it's sitting at 11,185, 3,600 deflect, and really that's about it. It doesn't really require this much recovery either, and same with action point gain. Alright, for powers, the main ones I use are Radiant Strike on L2 all the time. For non-dungeons, I use Burning Light. It just hits like a truck in Cholt. Divine Judgment for your daily, and Aura of Courage for your active power, well, personal. Aura of Vengeance, Binding Oath, Shielding Strike, and then Shield of Faith. And those are the ones I run around with, just in regular solo PvE content. For dungeons, it doesn't really change too much. Sometimes you switch Aura of Vengeance for Aura of Truth if you're having a hard time survive a fight, or like Withers on the second boss of Temple of the Nine Gods. And then Circle of Power gets switched on for your Burning Light. Or if you're doing like Orcus, you can run Sacred Weapon, and your Divine Judgments hit like a truck on Orcus. And for the final boss, I use Smite actually, because it throws that burn effect on. So when you're trying to lure them to the middle, you're still ticking off damage with that. And I am human, and that's for the 3 extra feat points. But this is the setup I run: 5 of 5 in Divine Action, 3 of 3 in Weapon Mastery, 3 of 3 in Toughness, 3 of 3 in Exemplar's Haste, 1 of 3 in Raffle Strikes, because I just needed the 1 more point to get to the last tier, 5 of 5 in Steadfast, because just way more HP, and then finally 3 of 3 in Force of Will. If you're not human and you're playing a Paladin tank, you can go without Force of Will, but I run it because it gives me an extra 20% critical strike, which altogether I end up at 72%. Then I run Bound by Light for control strength, Flash of Light, so My allies can get their cooldowns faster. Radiant Champion for the same thing, and a movement speed bonus. Echoes of Light, this actually resets your encounter powers pretty regularly. It happens far more than the 10% it states. Then I run 1 point in Beacon of Hope. This is just so we trigger some of our boon abilities. I'll get to that later. Same with Prism. I just put 2 points into it, so it has enough uptime before you have to, or before you can use your daily again. So it lasts 8 seconds. And then 2 points in Purifying Fire. This is just an extra damage on your at-wills. It makes your shielding strikes hit significantly harder. And then one in Vengeful Judge. This is everything you could want. It gives you faster cooldowns, faster divine call reset, and even more damage overall. Nothing in Bulwark. 5 of 5 in Gifts of Light. You don't really heal inherently with this build, but there's a lot of stuff that does proc it off, like the Beacon of Hope and Prism. And then I also run Warrior's Bastion. I do intend to try a build with running Light Touched, but I'll go over that a little bit later. And then 5 of 5 in Aura Gifts, so that you share 25% of your power to everybody. And then for boons, I do run our Armor Pen bonus for the time being. That's so that you can have enough Armor Pen to create enough threat on all your targets. Then for your PvP campaign, that doesn't matter for this build that much. In Challenger, I just went straight across the bottom. Power, crit, action point gain, and a chance to do an extra 20k damage on a hit. And then Elvish Fury, because the rest of them really aren't that useful for us. In Dreadring, I went with the Strength for the power and movement, Thirst for the Lifesteal because we don't need regen at all. This is to ignore more defense. Another chance of to proc off a damage buff. This is one of the ones that actually generates a lot of damage for us. It may not seem like it because of the 2000 damage, but every time you proc off the Prism or Beacon of Hope, it actually triggers this effect. So it's an extra AoE damage effect for you. And then in Icewind Dale, I took AoE resist, stamina gain, crit severity, power based on how much guard you're missing, which really doesn't happen very much. And then avalanche, just because you are gonna take all the hits from all the mobs and everything, it triggers quite frequently. In the Underdark, I went with 400 power, 400 crit. There I did take 1200 regen over the combat advantage, because as a tank you should never have combat advantage. 5% shorter control effects on you, which is always useful. And then on the last one, it can be any of these. They're all fairly useless. In Tyranny of Dragons, I went Power, Crit Strike, Armor Pen, and Lifesteal. And then Crit Severity. The reason I went Crit Severity is you can get some pretty large Divine Judgments with this build, especially when you're running the Sacred Weapon. The largest one I've had is 7.3 million. So it's fairly significant damage, especially when you can use your Divine Judgment every 12 to 15 seconds. But in the Maze Engine, I took Lifesteal Severity, shorter control effects, more action point gain, and then a chance to heal for 20,000 hit points. The reason I took this is it triggers both of those feats, and it's a potential of another heal. So it's just another thing to keep you alive longer. And the only other one you could really go with is maybe the Control Strength. But I think this heal for survivability is much more useful. In Elemental Evil, I went with Power, Lifesteal, Crit Strike, and then Gale Retribution for even more potential Crit Strike. If you feel like you're not getting your powers back quickly enough, Wall of Wind is another fine choice. In Storm King's Thunder, I went 2% in control resist, stamina gain, a potential of a 2,000 damage on your next attack, 3,200 HP. It may not seem like much, but it stacks up pretty well, and it's much more useful than doing 2,000 damage. And then I went 3 of 3 in Healing Warmth. Same thing with Burning Guidance. It triggers off from the 2 feats that we have that give us a heal, and it hits up to 5 enemies, so it's very useful. You could also split it up and run like 2 in Healing Warmth, 1 in Frozen Reflection. That really depends on how high you get your deflect up to. But I'd rather the constant 6,000 damage over the potential of a 5,000 damage hit. Cloaked Ascendancy, I went Aura of Hope. This is so all my allies get faster AP gain. Crit Strike Severity, and Lifesteal. And the reason I take Lifesteal over Recovery in this case is because with our Mount Power of Assassin's Covenant, this gives us more power overall. And then up top, just Aberrant Power. None of the rest of them are really all that useful for us. And finally in Chult, 3 of 3 in Tyrant's Terror for the 1,000 power. And then Soul Siphon. This allows us to hit AoE hit enemies, so we take out groups a lot quicker, and it gives you a little bit more survivability. And the rest of them really aren't that beneficial for us. Alright, on to the companions. On the companions, I run the Blacksmith. This is because we're taking all those hits, and we have a 25% chance to send 10% of that damage back. This is the one, the Aranea is the one that's interchangeable. Sometimes I run the Earth Archon or Aranea. It really just depends on your preference. The Arrhenius of Belial gives us 10% more critical severity. That's how we're getting those big Divine Judgments. the Air Archon for the damage bonus, and it's our primary companion. It's got reasonable survivability, but it hits very, very hard. And then, lastly, I just have the Paranoid Delusion. That's just a fun one for the most part. You can interchange that with, like, you could run a Fire Archon for more damage. You could potentially run the Energon for more HP, which is also useful. But if you're lower on the crit, like if you're below 50% crit, you can also run the Owlbear Cub. And then for mounts, I use Assassin's Covenant, Artificer's Persuasion, Magistrate's Patience, Protector's Camaraderie, and Gladiator's Guile. Of all these, I would highly suggest getting the Assassin's Covenant, Gladiator's Guile, and Protector's Camaraderie above the rest, in that order as well. And then for amount power, I use the 2000 power, but it really depends on how fast you get your dailies up. Mine come up, like I said, about every 12 or 13 seconds, so I don't worry about this. But if your powers are, your dailies coming up a little bit slower than that, maybe every 15 to 20 seconds, I would suggest something like Quick Action. Or if your skills aren't coming up fast enough, Rapid Recovery. And just to show off some of the damage potential, we'll just kill a couple of groups in Cholt. And then for a weapon enchant, I run the Fey Touched, because when you're facing some of the harder bosses, it lowers their damage output and then it increases yours in turn. So it's very useful for that. Let's see if we can find some harder groups to kill. There we go. We'll kill these tigers real quick. And that's pretty much the general rotation that I run. Is I'll charge in with Radiant Strike, Templar's Wrath, and then just start charging up Blinding Light. And that usually kills most stuff relatively quickly. And if they don't die before then, throw up that and hit our artifact. And that tends to kill most groups around here reasonably fast. Let's see what our Archon's putting our stats up to. As you can see, we can get to around 94, 95k power self-buffed, 18k crit, and I didn't see what that last one was. It looked like it is 16k armor pen. But alright, thanks for watching, and if you could like the video, I'd much appreciate it.